The Voxari would pay for every child they slaughtered, every family they tore apart, every world they razed. Christian Holmes would make damn sure of it, even if he had to burn their whole fucking empire down himself. The news report flashed gruesome images of Voxari atrocities. Towns reduced to rubble, piles of mutilated corpses, wailing orphans executed by laughing soldiers. Christian glared at the screen, rage simmering behind his eyes, one scarred by Voxari plasma. They had cleaved his face as they cleaved his world. Half his pay from this job would go to whiskey to numb the pain, the rest to weapons to share it. He drained his glass and strode to his ship, the Retribution. She was a beast, bristling with guns and bad intentions, much like her owner. "I'll take the contract," Christian growled over comms. The pay was princely, but he'd do it for a single bullet, if it went between Voxari eyes. The blue bastards craved the Izin hegemony's worlds, coveted their resources, just like they had Christian's home, before they burned it, before they orphaned him, before they made him a one-man army with nothing to lose. Christian was to train the Izin, teach them Voxari tactics, help them fortify, give them a fighting chance, a chance his people never had. But as the Retribution tore through space, a message blinked. The Voxari invasion had begun. Izin defenses were crumbling, their armies retreating. Christian's mission was aborted. Izin command said not to risk his life for a lost cause. They would not ask him to die for them in vain. But they didn't have to ask. His finger stabbed the throttle, rocketing towards the enemy. He would avenge his people. He would avenge the Izin. Or he would die making the Voxari choke on their betrayals. As Christian rockets towards Izin space, a distress call blares through his comms. Izin refugees fleeing the Voxari massacre. Christian checks his scopes, sees a hulking Voxari warship bearing down on the convoy. Rage flares in his gut. He slams the throttle, the Retribution surging forward. The Voxari cruiser fills his viewscreen, its weapons glowing as they charge. Christian doesn't wait for them to fire. His fingers fly over the console, bringing his ship's cannons online. Advanced human tech, light years beyond anything the Voxari scum have. He opens up, lances of searing light stabbing out, punching through the Voxari's shields like they're made of paper. Molten gashes tear across the warship's hull, venting atmosphere and bodies. The Voxari cruiser shudders, then its guns swivel, returning fire. Christian banks hard, the Retribution rolling as Voxari plasma scorches past. His targeting systems lock on, a squeeze of the trigger, and a volley of quantum torpedoes blaze from the Retribution's tubes. They arc out, then curve back in, slamming into the Voxari ship in blinding flashes. Explosions rip through the vessel, splitting it apart in a cloud of spinning debris. Christian keys his comms, hailing the refugee ships. "This is Christian Holmes of Earth. I'm here to help. Form up on me. I'll escort you out of here." The refugee ships quickly move into formation around the Retribution. On the lead ship, a young Izin in an officer's uniform hails him. "Thank you. I am Orin, of the Izin Defense Force. We are in your debt." Christian shrugs. "Killing Voxari is its own reward. You're just lucky I was in the area." Orin looks puzzled. "The area? But Earth is... You came all this way alone?" Christian nods. "I'm the only human in this sector. Probably the only one outside Sol right now." Orin's eyes widen. "I had heard Earth was isolationist, but I didn't realize my grandfather was part of a delegation to your world, seeking aid against the Voxari." Christian snorts. "Let me guess, we told you to fuck off?" Orin looks down. "In so many words, your leaders said humanity had endured too much at the hands of aliens, that you would never again trust a non-human species. Your world is a fortress now, its location hidden. Any foreign ship that approaches is destroyed without warning. My people never even got to make our case." Christian's face is an impassive mask. "Maybe if your people had shown a little backbone, you wouldn't be in this mess." Orin recoils as if struck, but before he can respond, alarms shrill on the Retribution's bridge. Christian checks his displays and swears. A whole damn Voxari fleet just appeared on long-range scans. and they're moving to cut off the refugee ships. Christian starts laying in a course around the Voxari, but Orin's voice cuts in. Wait! The colony of Orcs is in their path. We have to warn them. Christian shakes his head. They're already dead, and if we delay, your people will be too. I'm not risking that for a lost cause. Orin looks aghast, but he swallows and nods. The icy human is the only thing standing between them and annihilation. As the retribution changes course, Orin looks over at Christian. He sees something shift behind the human's eyes. A coldness. A ruthlessness. Christian catches his gaze and smirks. The alien has no idea. No idea of the horrors a human can inflict when pushed. No idea of the bloody retribution Christian has planned for every single Voxari. No idea at all. Days turned into weeks as Christian and the ease-in refugee ships dodged Voxari patrols. The humans' piloting skills and the Retribution's advanced stealth technology keeping them one step ahead of their pursuers. Christian pushed the convoy relentlessly, only allowing brief stops for repairs and resupply. His urgency born of bitter experience. He knew all too well the price of delay when fleeing a Voxari invasion. Finally, after a harrowing sprint through a dense asteroid field, they reached the relative safety of an uncharted nebula. Nestled within the swirling gases was a hidden ease-in base, a final redoubt for the scattered survivors of their once mighty hegemony. As the exhausted refugees stumbled from their ships, Christian pulled Orin aside. He pressed a small data chip into the ease-in's hand. "Take this," Christian said gruffly. "It's got intel on Voxari fleet movements, ship schematics, weak points. Use it." Orin stared at the chip, then up at Christian, surprise and gratitude warring on his face. "I thank you. This could change everything. With this data, we can—" But Christian was already turning away, striding back towards the Retribution. Orin hurried after him. "Wait, where are you going? We need you here. We need your help to plan our next move." Christian paused at his ship's airlock, looking back over his shoulder. "You've got your help. I've got a score to settle." And with that he was gone, the Retribution's engines flaring as it blasted out of the hangar and into the nebula. Gersen tabi fulkine. Nix, once a thriving Izin colony, now a Voxari-occupied hellscape. Its verdant surface had been strip-mined, its cities reduced to rubble, its people enslaved in vast work camps. Christian gazed down at the ravaged world, his face an impassive mask. The Retribution was currently powered down, drifting in the shadow of Nix's moon to avoid detection. He had no illusions about liberating the planet alone. That would take an army. But he could strike a blow against the Voxari here, make them bleed, shake their grip on this sector. And he knew just where to start. The Voxari citadel towered over the ruined capital, a jagged spire of black metal bristling with weapons. It served as the regional command center, the nerve center of the occupation. It was also the most heavily guarded structure on the planet. Infiltrating it would be suicide. Christian smiled. Good thing he was already dead inside. The night was moonless, the citadel's looming silhouette barely visible against the starry sky. Christian moved like a wraith through the rubble-strewn streets, clad head to toe in matte black stealth armor. He slipped past patrolling Voxari troops, their guttural voices and clanking gear making them easy to avoid. The citadel's main entrance was a fortress, all reinforced blast doors and auto turrets. But Christian had no intention of using the front door. Instead, he scaled the sheer outer wall, fingers and toes finding impossible purchase on the slick metal. At the 12th floor, he paused by a ventilation grate, prying it open silently and sliding inside. He dropped into a dimly lit service corridor, drawing his pistol. The weapon was a custom job, a high-powered Gauss gun that fired armor-piercing slugs at hypersonic speeds. It could punch a hole through a Voxari's skull at 1,000 paces. Not that Christian intended to be that far from his targets. He moved swiftly through the building, his HUD displaying a stolen schematic of the structure. He avoided the main corridors and barracks, sticking to maintenance shafts and back passages. When he couldn't avoid a group of Voxari soldiers, he dispatched them with brutal efficiency, his gun coughing softly as it sent tungsten spikes through eye sockets and throat gaps in their armor. No alarms were raised. The bodies were left where they fell, Christian not sparing them a backward glance. After an eternity of tense, stealthy progress, Christian reached his goal, the Citadel's main reactor chamber. Dispatching the guard detail with a frag grenade and a burst of fire, Christian sealed the blast doors and got to work. The reactor was a massive fusion torus, its shielding emblazoned with dire Voxari warnings about the lethal energies contained within. Christian rigged it to overload. He carefully sabotaged the containment systems and disabled the fail-safes, ensuring that when the reactor went critical, there would be no stopping the meltdown. His task complete, Christian made his exit, racing back the way he came as warning klaxons began to sound. He burst from the same vent he had entered, dropping 12 stories to the ground, his armor's impact gel absorbing the brutal landing. Hitting the ground at a run, Christian sprinted through the streets as behind him, a miniature sun bloomed at the Citadel's heart. For a moment, night turned to blinding day as the reactor containment failed utterly. Christian risked a glance back just in time to see the meltdown rip the Citadel apart from within. The tower exploded in a massive fireball, a searing wave of plasma and radiation expanding out to consume the surrounding city blocks. The blast wave hit Christian like a hammer, sending him sprawling. But he rolled with the impact and kept running, even as the roar of the explosion faded behind him. By the time Christian reached the outskirts of the Citadel was nothing more than a towering pillar of fire and smoke. Voxari ships were screaming into the sky from their orbital docks, racing to respond to the attack, but it was far too late. Christian allowed himself a tight smile as he reached the hidden gully where he had stashed a stealth shuttlecraft. The Voxari would be reeling from this blow, their hold on Nyx weakened. It was a start. As he blasted up and away from the planet's surface, Christian's thoughts turned to Orin and the Izin refugees. He wondered what they would make of the data he had left them. If they were smart, they would put it to good use. Because now the real fight could begin. Orin paced the command center of the hidden Izin base, his eyes glued to the holographic displays floating before him. All around the cramped room, Izin officers and technicians worked furiously at their stations, a palpable energy suffusing the air. News of the attack on Nyx had spread like wildfire through the Izin resistance network. The destruction of the Voxari Citadel had sent shockwaves through the occupation, inspiring a surge of rebel activity across a dozen systems. Resistance cells that had been dormant for years were suddenly springing to life, launching hit-and-run strikes on Voxari supply lines, sabotaging infrastructure, ambushing patrols. The Voxari response had been swift and brutal, as expected. Martial law was declared on occupied worlds, with strict curfews and random searches. Summary executions of suspected rebel sympathizers became commonplace. The Voxari tightened their grip, determined to crush this new defiance. But incredibly, impossibly, they were losing ground, because something was wrong with their ships. Reports began flooding in of Voxari vessels suffering catastrophic systems failures at critical moments. Engines would suddenly cut out mid-maneuver, sending cruisers careening into each other. Weapon systems would malfunction, energy beams fizzling out, or missiles detonating in their tubes. Shields would flicker and die without warning, leaving ships vulnerable. It was sheer chaos. The Voxari had never experienced such widespread crippling issues with their technology before. They were scrambling to understand what was happening, to contain the problem, but the malfunctions only seemed to be spreading. Watching it all unfold, Orin suddenly remembered the data chip Christian had handed him. With mounting excitement, he inserted it into the base's main computer and began sifting through its contents. What he found left him stunned. The chip contained detailed schematics of Voxari ships, down to the last bolt and circuit. But more than that, It highlighted critical weak points and vulnerabilities in their design. A note from Christian explained that he had gathered this data during his years of solo guerrilla warfare against the Voxari, through a combination of salvage, espionage, and reverse engineering. And Christian hadn't just provided a static dump of information. He had included a sophisticated computer virus, tailor-made to exploit the flaws in Voxari systems. The malfunctions plaguing their fleet were no accident. It was Christian's doing. Orin marveled at the audacity of it, the sheer brilliance. The human had handed the Izin the key to fighting back, to finally evening the odds against their oppressors. Wasting no time, Orin uploaded the virus to the base's transmitter and beamed it out on every frequency, to every corner of Izin space. He prayed it would find its way into the systems of every Voxari ship, every occupied outpost. And as the first reports came in of the virus wreaking havoc on Voxari vessels, light years away, Orin allowed himself to feel a small flicker of hope. The road ahead would be long and hard, and many would fall before the end. But for the first time in years, the Izin had a chance, and they had one unlikely ally to thank for it. Out there in the void, Christian was still fighting, still striking back against the Voxari with all the fury and skill of a one-man army. And Orin knew that as long as Christian was out there, the Voxari would never know peace. They had sown the wind, and now they would reap the whirlwind. The human was coming for them, and he would not stop until the Voxari had paid for their crimes 1,000 times over. Orin almost pitied them. Almost. Orin ducked as a plasma bolt sizzled past his head, close enough to singe his hair. All around him, the Izin strike team was pinned down, taking heavy fire from the Voxari base's automated defenses. Turrets stitched deadly patterns through the air, while drones rained explosives from above. They had infiltrated Zaphon using stolen Voxari ships, managing to slip past the orbital blockade and land undetected. But now, mere meters from their objective, it looked like their mission would end in failure and death. Orin risked a glance over the ruined wall he was using for cover. The command bunker loomed ahead, its armored doors firmly sealed. Somewhere inside, the Voxari Emperor was overseeing the final preparations for his new superweapon. If that monstrosity was allowed to deploy, it would mean the end of the Izin resistance and any hope of freedom. But Orin and his team were hopelessly outgunned. Voxari troops were massing for a counterattack, their boots pounding on the ferrocrete as they advanced. Orin checked his rifle's charge, nearly depleted. He looked to his soldiers, saw the despair in their eyes. Suddenly the ground heaved as a series of massive explosions rocked the base. Orin watched in disbelief as the defense towers erupted into flames, then crumbled into rubble. The turrets fell silent. The drones plummeted from the sky. A familiar ship swooped overhead, its human-made cannons raking the Voxari infantry with withering fire. The retribution had arrived. "It's about damn time," Orin shouted into his comm as Christian's voice crackled through. "Traffic was a bitch. You gonna sit there all day or what?" Orin grinned fiercely. "Izin forward for freedom." Rallying to Orin's cry, the strike team surged from cover, blasting through the disoriented Voxari troops. They stormed up to the bunker doors, slapping breaching charges across the reinforced metal. The shaped explosives detonated with a thunderous roar, blowing the doors off their runners. Smoke and debris billowed out, and the Izin poured in, rifles blazing. The bunker's interior was chaos, emergency lights flickering, klaxons blaring. Voxari soldiers and technicians scrambled for cover, returning fire haphazardly. Orin led the charge, his weapon bucking as he put down target after target. His soldiers fanned out, securing the room with ruthless efficiency. Then Orin saw him, the Voxari Emperor cowering behind a control console at the far end of the command center. Orin raised his rifle, drawing a bead on the warlord's head. The Emperor's eyes widened in fear as he saw death coming for him. His hand darted inside his robes, emerging with a small device. "Wait!" the Emperor shrieked. "I have a dead man's switch. I die, this whole base goes up, and you with it." Orin hesitated, finger tense on the trigger. He couldn't risk his team, not even for this. The Emperor bared his fangs in a triumphant sneer as the Izin wavered. But then Christian's voice crackled over the comm again. "Orin, take the shot." Orin shook his head. "I can't, he's got a bomb, we'll all die." "Orin, listen to me." Christian's voice was calm, controlled. "We all knew the risks coming in. Sometimes victory demands sacrifice." Orin looked to his team. These soldiers, his friends, who had followed him into the jaws of death itself. He saw no fear in their eyes, only resolve. They nodded to him, one by one. "Take the damn shot," Christian ordered. Orin exhaled, sighting down his barrel once more. The Emperor's sneer faltered, replaced by dawning horror. Orin pulled the trigger. The Emperor's head snapped back, a neat hole appearing in his forehead. His body toppled backwards. His finger spasmed on the switch. Orin closed his eyes. So this was how it ended. At least they had completed their mission. At least the Izin would have a chance. But no cataclysmic blast came, no searing wave of nuclear fire. Orin opened his eyes. Embedded in the Emperor's wrist was a small metal dart, a wire leading from it to the dead man's switch. The switch remained depressed, locked in place by the dart. "EMP dart," Christian explained casually over the comm. "Useful for disabling tech. You can thank me later. Now move your ass. I can't hold off these Voxari bastards forever." Orin shook his head in wonder, marveling once again at human ingenuity and audacity. With the Emperor dead, the Voxari chain of command fell apart. The soldiers in the base were leaderless, demoralized. Their fight turned to desperate flight. Orin and his team cut their way back out of the bunker, the Retribution providing blistering cover fire. They piled back into their captured ships and rocketed into the sky, Christian flying escort. As they breached atmosphere, explosions blooming across Zafon's surface as the Izin fleet pressed the attack, Christian let out a whoop over the comm. "Hell of a job, Orin. That's one for the history books." Despite the exhaustion, the near brushes with death, Orin found himself grinning back. They had done the impossible today, struck a blow against the Voxari that would resound across the galaxy. But even as the adrenaline and elation sang through his veins, a sobering thought crept in. The war was far from over. The Voxari would be reeling from this, but not broken. They would regroup, retaliate. And Orin worried what other insane gambles Christian might have in store for their next move. The Izin homeworld burned. Voxari ships darkened the skies, disgorging hordes of soldiers onto the once pristine surface. Smoke billowed from shattered cities, while the screams of the dying echoed across the ravaged landscape. In the chaos of the Emperor's death, the Voxari had fractured, warlords and would-be successors vying for control of the crumbling empire. But one faction, led by a fanatical general, had rallied the fleet for a final, all-out assault on the Izin. Their goal was nothing less than total extermination. Izin forces fought back with desperate courage, armed with modified human weapons supplied by Christian, railguns, plasma rifles, quantum torpedoes. The once outmatched Izin now wielded the firepower to match their foe. And it still wasn't enough. High above the embattled planet, Izin and Voxari fleets clashed in a titanic space battle. Ships whirled and danced in lethal ballet, trading volleys of searing energy. At the heart of the maelstrom, the Retribution carved a path of destruction, Christian at the helm. His weapons spat sun-bright death, every shot placed with inhuman precision. Voxari cruisers crumpled like tin cans, frigates swatted from the sky. But then a shadow fell over the battlefield, a Voxari dreadnought, a behemoth bristling with guns, and mounted on its prow, a weapon out of nightmare. A dark energy cannon. Kat fired a lance of obsidian lightning. The beam caught a Izin battleship, the pride of the fleet. For a heartbeat, the vessel remained intact, a hole punched clean through. Then it simply disintegrated, dissolving into a cloud of atoms. Izin comms crackled with screams of horror, of despair. Against such a weapon, what hope did they have? But one voice cut through the panic, raw with defiance. "Orin, this is Christian. I have a plan, but I'll need your help." On the bridge of his battered flagship, Orin listened, hope warring with dread as Christian outlined his scheme. It was audacious. It was desperate. It was the only way. "Understood," Orin said at last. "May the gods watch over you, my friend." Christian's laugh crackled over the comm. "I make my own luck, give 'em hell, Orin." With that, the retribution peeled away, arrowing straight for the Voxari dreadnought. Around it, Orin's ship surged forward in a last desperate charge, drawing the enemy's fire. The dark energy cannon spun to face them, its maw yawning wide. Orin watched it track his flagship, a cold certainty settling in his gut. This was the end, but it would not be in vain. "For the hegemony," he roared. "For Izin!" His fleet echoed the battle cry, a defiant chorus against the encroaching dark. The cannon fired. At that same instant, a bright flare erupted against the dreadnought's hull. The retribution ramming into the larger ship at full burn, its shields and armor blazing as they absorbed the impact. The dreadnought lurched, its shot going wide. The beam scythed past Orin's flagship, close enough to scorch its hull. Then the retribution was through, vanishing into the gash its impact had torn. Boarding action. Orin had no time to ponder Christian's fate. The Voxari were recovering, their ships moving to envelop his battered fleet. They had to buy Christian time, even if it cost them everything. Orin's ships clashed with the enemy in brutal point-blank exchanges, beam weapons flaring, torpedoes crisscrossing the void. Hulls buckled, reactors went critical. Space became a graveyard of slagged metal and frozen corpses. But still they fought on, a dwindling island of defiance amid a sea of foes. Just as all seemed lost, just as the last of Orin's ships faced annihilation, a new sun birthed in the heart of the Voxari fleet. The dreadnought. It came apart in a blinding fireball, white light erupting from every viewport and hull breach. A chain reaction of secondary explosions ripped through the massive vessel, tearing it into burning fragments. Christian had done it. Against all odds, the madman had done it. The Voxari reeled, thrown into disarray by the sudden loss of their flagship. Orin wasted no time in pressing the momentary advantage. "All ships, attack," he barked. "Drive them back for Izin." His remaining vessels hurled themselves at the enemy, guns blazing, a berserk charge fueled by desperation and renewed hope. Caught off balance, the Voxari lines bent, then broke. It was no orderly retreat. It was a rout, ships fleeing in blind panic, heedless of direction or cohesion. They ran before the Izin onslaught, a broken rabble. The battle was won, the world was saved. But as Orin scanned the wreckage-strewn battlefield, his heart clenched. There was no sign of the retribution, no signal from Christian, nothing but drifting debris where the dreadnought had died. In the days that followed, Izin ships combed the battlefield, searching desperately for some sign of their human savior. They found only twisted metal and frozen fragments, no trace of ship or man. Christian Holmes was gone, lost to the void and the flame. The Izin grieved. They had won their freedom, but the cost had been high, too high, and none had paid a greater price than the strange, distant race that had sent one of its own to fight for them. Humanity, Terrans, they were an enigma, a contradiction, capable of breathtaking violence and unfathomable sacrifice. What did the galaxy know of them, really? Only this. When the Voxari had come, when all hope seemed lost, a human had stood with the Izin, had bled for them, had died for them. And in doing so, he had taught a broken race to stand tall once more, to fight, to win. They would never forget, never. On a distant blue world, far from the battlefields of Izin space, a message was received. It had traveled far, a ghost signal from the front lines of a now finished war. There were no words, no voice, just an image. A helmet, battered and scorched, drifting against the stars, a human helmet. The image hung in the air, stark in its simplicity, searing in its finality. A tombstone, a eulogy, a remembrance. There were no parades on Earth, no speeches or memorials for the lost hero, only a quiet, grim pride and a cold, unflinching resolve. The galaxy had taken one of theirs, had dared to spill human blood. It would not happen again. They Zin had learned the price of human wrath, the fury of a species pushed too far. Now the rest of the galaxy would learn it too. Earth was coming, and the stars would tremble before it. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.